Hey guys, it's Andy here, and today we're looking at Standard. This is a Davriel discard deck that I put together for you guys. I'm just going to touch over the main deck here, talk about the sideboard, interactions between, and hopefully you guys enjoy the video. So to start off the lineup, we're going to go with the namesake of the deck, and the reason I put the whole deck together, and that is the 4 of Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage, who is a 3 loyalty planeswalker for 3, so 2 and a black. And at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 1 or fewer cards in hand, Davriel Rogue Shadow Mage deals 2 damage to them. He also has -1. Target player discards a card. Started the build around this guy. One of the initial builds. So this plays a lot more like a mid-rangey deck, but it's got a lot of discard in it. So the discard's kind of a side thing. And if we can work the hand down enough, Davriel ends up chipping in for damage later on anyway. So there's that kind of synergy. Another way you could build the deck is taking out so we're running 4 Thief of Sanity and 4 Terramander. So Thief of Sanity is for 3, a 2/2 Spectre. When it deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of their library, you exile one of them face down, and then you put the rest into their graveyard. And then for as long as it remains exiled, you may look at that card, you may cast that card, and you may spend mana result or any color to cast that spell. That is the replacement for what was originally 4 copies of Fell Spectre. So if you want to go full down the discard path, you could stick 4 of this guy in. He's for 4, 3 and a black. He's a 1/3 Spectre with flying, and when he enters the battlefield, target opponent discards a card, and whenever opponent discards a card, they also lose 2 life. Having the opponent lose life whenever they discard a card is a very Megrim thing to do. With the coming in and making them discard a card, you're guaranteed to at least get 2 damage out of this, and then you're going to be chipping in with the flyer. But I just felt like this specifically, the Thief of Sanity was just a better option. If you want to go down the full discard path, the Fell Spectre is a good card for that, but I just felt like the Thief of Sanity, it's more consistent, it's a better rate, it's a cooler effect. Depending on what you're trying to do, more often than not, it's a cooler effect, because you can play your opponent's cards, be it their removal, their draw card, their creatures, whatever. I just feel like Thief of Sanity is a much better card for the deck, as well as the 4 copies of Terramander, which is for 1 blue, a 1/1 Salamander Drake with flying, and it's also got pay 8, so 7 and a blue, to adapt 4. So it costs 1 less to activate for every instant and sorcery in your graveyard, but when you activate it for the 8 cost, you put 4+1 counters on it, and then it becomes a 5/5 flyer for 1. Absolutely love Scary Terry. He's an absolute all-star in a lot of decks that I put him in. Him chipping in as a 1 mana 5/5, insanely good rate. In the original version of the list, I was running 4 copies of Plaguecrafter, which is 4/3, 2 and a black. It's a 3/2 human shaman. And then when it enters the battlefield, your opponent either sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, or if they can't, they discard a card. So it had the discard synergy in there. Again, if you want to go down the discard path, this is another way to do it. Or depending on your meta and what you're playing up against, the Plaguecrafter might just be a better pick than what the Terramander is. But I doubt it. The Terramander, more often than not, is a more reliable and better pick for me. If you're coming up against a lot of control, that's when Terramander kind of falls off a bit, and the Plaguecrafter being able to take out Planeswalkers as it enters the battlefield can be really, really cool. So both good cards, but for this version of the deck, I'm going with the Terramander just for the evasive flying, being able to chip in and kill Planeswalkers with a 5/5, or just being able to race our opponent and hit them in the face with a 5/5. Always going to be a good thing. Plaguecrafter, Fell Spectre, both good cards. Go down the discard path, that's another way to take the deck, but that's not what this deck's doing. 3 copies of God Eternal Kefnet, which is for 4. It's a 4/5 legendary creature zombie god with flying, and you may reveal the first card you draw each turn as you draw it. Whenever you reveal an instant or sorcery card this way, copy that card and you may cast the copy. That copy costs 2 less to cast. And then if he dies or is sent to exile from the battlefield, you may put it into its owner's library, 3rd from the top. Absolutely love Kefnet in this, being able to play the spells off the top of our deck, an additional time, getting extra triggers, extra discard, extra removal, extra draw card, insanely cool. And the recurring factor on the bottom of the card, being able to constantly just, okay, he died, 3rd from the top, I'm going to draw back into him later, and I'm going to be hitting you again in the face with a 4/5 beater. So you can see the recurring theme with the creatures is they're all evasive flyers, and that's not an accident. It's specifically trying to get over our opponent's creatures and hit them in the face. 3 copies of Spark Double, and this will finish off the creatures. So Spark Double is for 4, 3 and a blue. It's a 0/0 illusion, and you may have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or planeswalker you control, except it enters with an additional +1 counter if it's a creature, or it enters with an additional loyalty counter if it's a planeswalker. And it also comes in and isn't legendary, even if the thing that you chose was. So this allows us to have multiple copies of Kefnet out, or multiple copies of Davriel out. One of the things you need to note is if you do pick the Terramander, it's going to come in with a +1 counter on it, which means you're not going to then be able to adapt it, because you only adapt it if it has no counters on it. So one thing that's kind of shit, but we've got enough in here that we're going to be able to target get essentially an extra 3 copies of whatever we want, be it the God Eternal Kefnets, the Thief of Sanities, or the Davriels. Adding to the draw card, we have 3 copies of Chemist's Insight, which is for 4. 3 and a blue at instant speed, you draw 2 cards, and it also has Jumpstart. So as an additional cost to cast this from your graveyard, you just discard a card. So you can pay for, discard a card, play it again from your grave. Kind of like a pseudo flashback. It's insanely cool, and it's a great draw card. On the more removal side of things, as well as kind of tempo, is the 4 copies of Tyrant Scorn. I see this card as kind of being like an Unsummon and Fatal Push having a baby. And that disgusting thing is this. So it's for 2, just a blue and a black. At instant speed, you can choose 1. You can either destroy target creature with mana cost 3 or less, which is a lot of the most useful stuff in the format at the moment. Or you can return target creature to its owner's hand. And with the amount of discard that we have in this deck, being able to bounce something back to their hand and then just make them discard it can be insanely cool. Just adding to the tempo, being able to bounce their most expensive thing back to their hand, but it's also synergizing really well with the discard side of stuff. Adding to the discard, we have 4 copies of Thought Erasure and 4 copies of Vicious Rumors. Thought Erasure is for 2, a blue and a black. It's at sorcery speed, and target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it, and that player discards that card. Surveil 1. So you get to look at the top card of your library, and you can put that card into your graveyard if you want. The 4 copies of Vicious Rumors, absolutely love this card. An argument could be made that Duress belongs in this spot over Vicious Rumors. You can make that argument all you like. I like this card better. At least in the main board anyway. So it's for 1 black, that's sorcery speed. It deals 1 damage to each opponent. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into their graveyard, and I gain a life. So if you're in a multiplayer game, this is hitting each opponent, which is one thing to remember. But even in a solo game, being able to, for 1 mana, deal a damage, make them discard a card, mill the top card, and we gain a life, insanely cool. It's doing 4 different things at a 1 cost. I don't know how this isn't seeing more play in more decks. One card this has really good synergy with that I had in the original version of the list, or even in the black version, or the mono black version of this list, was 4 copies of Drill Bit, which you can play for a spectacle cost of 1. So if you play this, it's dealing damage to your opponent, and then you can play a Drill Bit for 1 as well. Just a cool kind of janky synergy that plays really well into if you want to be playing the full discard side of things. And to finish off the spells here, we're playing 4 copies of Blink of an Eye, which is for 2, 1 and a blue. It's at instant speed, and it's also got kick at 2, so 1 and a blue. You return target null permanent to its owner's hand, and if this spell was kicked, you draw a card. So being able to use it as protection on your own creatures, use it as protection on a Davriel if we need to, or just being able to bounce stuff back to our opponent's hand and just gaining that tempo, and potentially drawing a card depending on whether or not we kicked it. Absolutely love Blink of an Eye. It's a great card. Looking at the land base here, we have 6 swamp, 6 islands, 4 copies of Drowned Catacomb, which comes in tapped unless you control a island or swamp. 4 copies of Watery Grave, which is an island swamp that comes in tapped unless you pay 2 life. And 3 copies of Blast Zone, just in here as kind of more removal, adding to the removal. Really good card, absolutely love it. Enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it. It's got tap, add colors, but it's also got pay 2x to tap it and put X charge counters on it, or pay 3 to tap and sack it and destroy each non-land permanent with no mana cost equal to the number of charge counters on Blast Zone. So depending on what we're playing against, this could be really, really useful. Good in the aggro matchups, really good in the controlling matchups because it's a land that they're not just going to be able to answer when we try to do the ability, and it does add some really necessary removal to the deck. It's really good. Touching on the sideboard here, we have 3 copies of Ashiok Dream Render, which is for 3, 1 and 2 hybrid, any combination of blue or black. It's a 5 loyalty planeswalker. With spells and abilities your opponents control can't cause their controller to search their library. And his neg 1 ability is target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard and then exile each opponent's graveyard. He shines in the graveyard matchups, but depending on what you're playing against, the mill could be really important too, because this is potentially 20 cards off the top of our opponent's deck, which could be really useful. 3 copies of Duress, which I mentioned earlier. So for 1 black at sorcery speed, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-creature, non-land card from it, that player discards that card. Because planeswalkers are so prominent in standard at the moment, we're running fairly specific removal for that with 2 copies of the Elder Spell, which is for 2 black at sorcery speed. You destroy any number of target planeswalkers, you choose a planeswalker you control, and you put 2 loyalty counters on it for each planeswalker destroyed this way. We don't really care about the second part of that, but being able to destroy any number of planeswalkers can be really, really relevant depending on the matchup. 2 copies of Cry of the Canarium, more for the aggro matchup. Really good sweeper. It's for 3, 1 and 2 black at sorcery speed. All creatures get neg 2 until end of turn, and exile all creature cards in all graveyards that were put there from the battlefield this turn. If a creature would die this turn, exile it instead. More removal in the form of Vraska's Contempt in a 2 of, and the Cast Down in a 2 of. So Cast Down is for 2, destroy target non-legendary creature, and Vraska's Contempt in there for the exile component of at a 4 cost, 2 and 2 black at instant speed, you exile target creature or planeswalker, and you gain 2 life. little bit of game life can be relevant, but being able to exile stuff like Rekindling Phoenix, that's going to be a pain in the ass recurring and coming back, or any one of the Planeswalkers in the control matchups, Vraska's Contempt is a really good card for that. To finish off the sideboard here, we're also running a single copy of Argyl's Bloodfast, which is a legendary enchantment for 2, 1 and a black. It's got pay 1 and a black and pay 2 life to draw a card. And it's got, at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, you may transform Argyl's Bloodfast. So if it's flipped, it becomes Temple of Aklazotz, which is a legendary land with tap, add 1 black to your mana pool, or tap, sacrifice a creature, you gain life equal to the sacrificed creature's toughness. That can be really relevant depending on your matchup. But that is the sideboard, and that is the main board. And that is Davriel discard in Standard. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to see new videos as they were released. If you like what I do and you want to support the channel, you can throw me $1 on my Patreon at patreon.com/SandersQuest. And I will see you guys in the next video. Keep questing, guys.